sometimes it's just in normal labor context that we don't know much about in the context. But people were also described as being sick, having fled, and also having died. Well, that could just looking at the evidence from that perspective, it could give you the perspective that there wasn't any administrative context of imprisonment, that everybody was privately dependent upon those around them to care for them, and that everybody just suffered in prison. But that's not necessarily the picture we get when we look at the earthly period. The text DAS 206 records 203 liters of bread for 7 people, for 7 prisoners. The broken line of the reverse 6 is reconstructed to 29 days, since we know that each prisoner was receiving 1 liter of bread per day. So during the earthly period, we know, at least in this prison at this time, the prisoners were each receiving 1 liter of bread for their subsistence. Taking those figures to related texts around the same period of time, we can then establish how many people were involved in what is called the big prison. This is a bigger prison at Girsu. And this is associated with the workhouses or the roadhouses I mentioned earlier. We know from at Amar Suin 5, year 5, month 7, day 19, there were 2 prisoners being held there, and also 6 captives at the woodshed working. We have 2 and 6 in the next example. The number of individuals in the prison fluctuates from 2 up to 5 in month 8, day 11, and then goes back to and sort of stabilizes at 4 from the rest of the evidence that is available to us. And it seems that the woodshed has a sort of stable number of captives being worked there during that time, each receiving again a liter of bread per day. So this can be contrasted to the earlier picture of being held and being dependent upon others to provide for you. These individuals are being provided for by the administrative body a certain amount of rations. And one thing that is noticeable here or observable is we don't have any large numbers of prisoners in these texts. 1, to 2, 4, 5, and it seems that unless they're being moved somewhere else, they're not being imprisoned for a very long period of time. We're going to return to that question in a little bit. Well, let's return now with these different pictures of life on the inside to our literary text, Nungal. Nungal is not only miserable. The prison is not only miserable. She describes her house as built on compassion. My house is built on compassion. I am a life-giving lady. Its shadow is like that of a cypress tree growing in a pure place. When someone has been brought into the palace of the king, and this man is accused of a capital offense, again debated terminology, my chief prosecutor, Nindimgal, stretches out his arm in accusation. He sentences that person to death, but he will not be killed. He snatches the man from the jaws of destruction and brings him into my house of life and keeps him under guard. Do you see what the imagery is talking about? The crime requires capital punishment or some sort of punishment that will result in the death of the individual. But Nungal snatches the person from the jaws of death and brings them into her house, which is life-giving and compassionate. My house gives birth to a just person, but exterminates a false one. Earlier, when it's deciding between the guilty and the innocent, it gives birth to the just person in the sense that it sets them free. But there's also going to be in the text a transformation that takes place in the prisoner who's been brought back into the prison. Since there are pity and tears within its brick walls, and it is built with compassion, it soothes the heart of that person and refreshes his spirits. When it has appeased the heart of his God for him, when it has polished him clean like silver of good quality, when it has made him shine forth through the dust, when it has cleansed him of dirt like silver of best quality. So there is this purification idea that takes place through imprisonment. Again, very interesting concept of reform or change through imprisonment. And one of the ways that this happens, the primary way this happens in the hymns of Nungal, is it's through the function of lamentations. So this is a ritual transformation that takes place. They hear the laments, they sing the laments, and this is meant to make the person change ritualistically. Well, do we find any similar ideas in documents of practice, or is this just one literary text that someone happened to write down and a lot of people copy? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Well, we do see a Reformed text about prisons in the Reforms of Urukagina, but this is a reform about the prison itself, prison reform, rather than reformation of people. So this is dealing with letting people go out of prison. And there's various changes that take place here. Debtors are let free. There's also changing of practices, so people are not beating their children as part of the labor process and stuff like that. So it's meant to be this thing that's pleasing to the God whose temple they're building. Well, what about the law codes? So-called law codes.